There,
Yeah.
some of the guys want to check in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I haven't seen you on the group. I didn't know you were interested. I've been sending off links to everybody. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of just a lurker in the background.
Good stuff.
I like to follow different trends, people, having different ideas and seeing where the trends are leading. So
no, that's good stuff. Last time we talked, I think you had mentioned that you were starting a business. I think it was with your family.
Yes, it's a family thing. It's a soap company that basically. Yeah, my mother had the idea, and my brother is a physicist, and he basically went through all the formulas and made it, simplified the process, and it's,
Excellent. So it's going well?
I don't know all the science. I'm more a thinking guy.
Yeah.
And calculating guy.
Yeah. So is it coming together well, or?
Yeah, we're having some difficulties in like just getting all the things rolling, and many, and working through. I don't know. Maybe I'm not gonna go too personal if you're gonna record this.
Yeah, no, that's true. No, I was just wondering because starting a business is always difficult. There's a million moving parts that I think unless you've done it a few times, nobody really understands that. That little shop up the street, how much those owners go through just to keep it going, right? So,
yeah, and also just all the personal issues that go along with it. And it's a family thing now, and just working out all the family problems that our cooking have emerged in our culture. And I'm trying to figure these problems out since I was like 15, because I was like, this doesn't make sense. Something off. Always had this in my back of my head, like, why are these inconsistencies in how people talk and think?
Well, yeah, and in the family thing, I mean, the one thing that gets me, and I think on one hand, the Western way is to sort of, you leave your father's house and go forward your own life. But at the same time, people go off into their own house and then never speak to their family for, sometimes years at a time. So how can we balance the two where we're supporting each other, right? We're off building our own lives, but you still have that support network underneath it. And
yeah, exactly. That's why I really like the idea of agency and focusing on agency and really defining that in your mind.
Mm-hmm. That was a big shift for me too, that it's like you're not focusing so much on the outcome of the product, what we're going to get out of this, as much as how can we expand what we're doing? How can we increase agency, right? It's a subtle shift.
Yeah, it's kind of like focusing on the principles first and allowing things to emerge from the principles. Instead of making it about just getting more and more money, because these things will come, but getting them the right way, the proper way, where basically you heal your family in the process, get everything organized so everybody's on the same page. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, but it's true. It's like defining a common ground, right? So we're going through something similar because my wife and I are starting that Toronto location for the kitchen and baths. We're essentially halfway through the first year of a business startup. Even though the business is established, we don't have access to most of the systems and processes from the head location. So we're starting from scratch. So then it's a constant balance between how that's affecting our marriage, how that's affecting our family life and time, how it affects my daughter, plus everything involved with the business itself. And what I keep coming back to is focusing on the partnership. Like that we're a team. We're not two individual units within the business. We're a team throughout the whole thing. And then from there, we've ended up identifying strong parts, and that's where we kind of separate. Now my role is not just behind the drill; it's these other things, and then hers is in the showroom. It's starting to become clearer and working. So about to get busier than I can comprehend starting tomorrow. So which is good.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. I had some points, but you went far ahead of me. Yeah. And, but with family, friends, and everything, you know, building basically a hierarchy of common agency that is like everybody knows their role and their place, and can still, you know, expand that knowledge into other people's realms and learn from them. So it becomes a consistent, stronger structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I found interesting, because I'm backfilling wherever it's needed. So if I'm on the job site, I'm the helper. I'm the bottom rung on the ladder, right? So I defer to the lead hand. I'm learning from him. But then in 5 minutes that can shift, and now we're making project management decisions, and now I slip into that hierarchy. And that notion of first among peers and that Aristotelian egalitarian starts to make sense, because it's whenever you pop into somebody's domain of competency, the hierarchy shifts, and it's shifting according to what is the most effective way. It's really kind of cool, because a lot of the ego and a lot of the personal problems dissolve, because when people are in your area of competency, everybody else defers to them, and then you return that respect when you're out of your competency, right? There's Sean.
Respect for competence. Yeah, and also, like, that's why I don't like all the socialists. They don't like to acknowledge competence as, you know, a virtue or a good thing. They just, I live in Iceland, and it's been, since I remember myself, it's been constant feminism this, feminism that. It's like living in a mind of a parasite or something. It's really disturbing, and because there's so many social issues that didn't need to exist in the first place. People don't want to see where they are incompetent and where they are competent, and where they have to step down and let the competent person take their place.
You know, I think there's a focus on the power of it. So if you're I think the presumption is if you're in a hierarchy, those above you they're there because they have more power or ability. And what I'm finding is that people higher up in the hierarchy are there because they're the ones that hold responsibility. So the guy that you're deferring to on a job site, you are, because he's the guy that's going to catch the shit if something goes wrong. He's not necessarily the best, but he is the one that's responsible. The next job, you might be the one that's responsible. So you need the support from them to defer and so on. And then having that around, it's interesting to watch. But I think that's the side of competence hierarchies that gets ignored, is that you move up the hierarchy by your ability to take on more responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, Sean, have anything to say?
Can you hear us, Sean?
I just finished, so can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah. How you doing today?
Yeah, I just was trying to get my little headphones paired up to the Bluetooth so that I don't get any feedback loop going here.
Oh, okay. Is it working all right?
So, but I think so. You know, it's a little bit laggy, but that's to be expected, I think, you know.
Yeah.
So
I was going to try to do this from my phone.
We all get free services, and then we all bitch when they're not perfect, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like the most amazing technology we've ever witnessed in our life. Like just 10 years ago, you'd have probably spent $2,000 easy just to have access to it.
Yeah.
And now, if it's not perfect, you're like, oh, this laggy piece of shit, I hate it, you know.
Yeah, and if it's not free too, then we complain about it. So.
Yeah. I mean, like I'd never even heard of Zoom. I'm like, okay, so this is what they're using. So it prompts me. I don't even have to go look. It prompts me like, hey, come over here, download me. Like, all right, I'm with you, bro. Let's go talk to Bill Jocelyn in person instead of watching him on videos or seeing him post on Facebook. Cool.
Yeah. No, and I tried to get the Google Hangouts to work, but I've always had problems with it on my system, and I'm not sure why. Like I was supposed to do a show with one guy, and we couldn't get the audio to work. So about half an hour ago, I tried to turn it on, get it working, and I was just like, screw it. I know Zoom works, and I know it's simple, and I know everybody can download it, so I just jumped over here. The Hangouts is nice.
And I'm not sure if I recognize this other gentleman. Is it just the three of us in here right now?
Right now, yeah. This is Ivar.
Okay, nice to meet you, Ivar. I'm Sean.
Thanks. Yeah, so
I definitely came in. I came in with you saying that you despise socialists, and I have to agree with you there. I can't say that means I'm necessarily in love with capitalists, but I definitely, if I have to choose one or the other, I'm going to choose the capitalists.
Yeah.
At least they do rely on something like what you were describing, Bill, like a hierarchy of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm 42 years old, and it's just now coming to me to realize that, like, well, this is like the main problem in my life is that I'm pretty high in openness and creativity and not necessarily assertive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I went and kicked old Jordan Peterson $10 and took his little test, even though there was free ones on the internet, just because I was having fun, you know, being part of the cult or whatever.
Yeah.
And I like Jordan and all of his work, and I understand why he avoids all the controversial shit. Like, it does so much bad for most people to get deeper into what you would call real politic or conspiracy shit. Like, very few people come out the other side of it. Like, I feel like I have. Like, I feel like everything's moot to me, and I've gained more by looking at all of that kind of crap than I ever would have by not.
Yeah, me too.
I'd say that I feel like the same thing you go in there against is what you become. Like, you become adept and you go, oh crap, everyone should stay away from this shit.
Yeah, no, I think it's, well, I know Nick called it, he grabs it from Taleb, but it was that barbell strategy. So I've been too much in my head for too long. I'll go find candy. I'll watch everything I can on like Sasquatch or some nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and I'll do it until I'm almost believing it. And then I'll go back again and start tearing it apart. And then that's the entrance back into, you know, proper thinking. But it's like you almost got to take a break from it. And what I like about conspiracy theories is there is so much data in there. And then when you start applying the proper thinking processes, you can identify where there is real concern and real conspiracy and where there's real data. And then you can also see where, I mean, almost all conspiracy theory in structure is a Marxist theory. It's all based on class conflict. So when you start parsing your way through that, you inevitably start looking at more nuanced geopolitics, more nuanced history. Like you almost have to get better at thinking to accommodate the oversimplifications and the contradictions. And the conspiracy theories don't go away, but it's Kevin Cole had said that too. It becomes less of a conspiracy and more just history. This is just how humans have always been, right?
Yeah. I was so happy to find Bronco Malik. I actually went and signed up to kick him $5 every month just so that he'd keep going, because it's like, oh crap, here's somebody that's like what I'm trying to do in my head, he's apparently been doing for years and publishing it all, not only just publishing it, but publishing it in audio.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Because I sit at a job where I tool wax most of the day to prepare lost wax process for bronze investment, you know.
Okay.
So it's a very tedious, monotonous, redundant job. And my boss is hella cool. He's one of my best friends. We've only known each other about 3 years. And he doesn't care if I stick my headphones on. Once we're set into a job, he doesn't care. Mm-hmm. So I just absorb audio all day, and I can't listen. I'm a rock and roll musician since I was a teenage kid. So I can't really listen to music hardly at all. I'll listen to some like Blackgrass or really old classic outlaw country. But even that, it's just like, I'm too critical of music to enjoy it. Like, they roll the classic rock and the hip hop and pop shit all day at work. And that's the main reason I went and got headphones. I'm just going nuts. Like, if I have to hear Journey one more time, I'm going to fucking scream.
Yeah.
So, but Bronco Malik, I fell in love with that guy's stuff because he takes it right back to what you were talking about. Bruel, is that the man's name?
Yeah. Well, when you
Bruel, like, there's the fountainhead, you know. We're like, oh, here's where it's coming from. Thank God. It's only taken me 10 years or 20 years to find it, but here's where the what looks like the real beginning of this shit. You know?
And quite frankly, it's like Burrell laid out that the means that we call manipulation now was the means for the Enlightenment to rise.
Yeah.
Right. And then it makes perfect sense that if you're in a world where most of the power is centered on a monarchy and a church, then you use whatever means are available to you, which is, rally the middle classes, rally the lower classes, that sort of thing. And it's simply just become embedded in modern systems. No different than the Rhodes Round Tables, starting off as a way of subverting democracy, has now become a part of our democratic systems as lobby groups. Yep. So when you dive in deep enough, it's like, well, wait a minute, we can be outraged about this, but this is just how our systems are built. They're just built on sophisticated parasitism. We're just not aware of it.
Yeah.
So my apologetics around conspiracy theory is we should be outraged about it, but not because it's a conspiracy. It's because this system sucks.
Right. Because we need a more honest system.
Yeah.
We need an honest system, right? That's why I loved your post, your comment the other day about, just bringing it up at work, or that rings so true to me. That's what I do all the time. I try and tell people, that's why most of my Facebook feed, I don't do like a lot of these truther type people, just posting, because I'm a conspiracy nut, man. I delve into all of it, and I'm not afraid anymore because I feel like I have a center finally. Like, I want to garden with my girlfriend and be effective and efficient in networking with other people that have similar like minds. And other than that, get to know myself better, spiritually look inside, and not, where I first found you, Bill, was talking with Jan about meditation. And it wasn't when it was first broadcasted. It was me, pouring through the links like, well, this looks interesting. Here's somebody being contrary to the typical, oh, you should meditate every day. This is like what the typical thing you see. And so for someone to be at least critical of it and like, well, no, you could be like jumping yourself into a gang where you believe in a hierarchy that doesn't necessarily exist. And now you're spending all of your time thinking about trying your damnedest to think about nothing.
Yeah.
And now you've lost years of your life, so that's,
Yeah. And then on the other side of that is that there's a lot of tremendous value out of the practices, but they're mundane. They're mundane benefits, but they're powerful. That gets lost in sort of this mystic ambition. They used to call it spiritual glamour. But at the same time, like the story that I had told Jan about, it was a wilderness survival class that I was at, and the whole one of the exercises was if you can identify certain patterns in nature over the course of a week or over the course of a day, it increases your ability to track and find game. And then one of the offshoots of that is if you're familiar enough with the pattern, whether it be noise or activity, you can pick up when there's a disturbance in it. Well, when you're living out there, because I'd lived in the bush for 3 months with primitive skills, it starts to get embedded in your daily routine. So, when it's coming up on lunch, there's more bird sound, there's more insect sound. And if it's not there, something feels off, so it blew me away. It's like, our minds are amazing, right? And that's what I really wanted to pursue. So I obviously dove into the spiritual side of it and got really wrapped up in that identity, but it was never what my initial intent was. And I think that's what allowed me to kind of come back out of it. It was like my intentions were very redneck. It wasn't at all spiritual, right? So I got back to my redneck
and
way.
I got that. I think most people probably missed that in the, I assume, I don't know. I mean, I haven't talked to anyone else that sat through that broadcaster, but I know I have a reasonable judgment of how people are, and it's like, oh, so this guy's against it.
Yeah.
And like, that's not, if you watch the whole thing and listen, at the end, you even I remember you tried to resolve the whole thing like, and here's the things that I can take away from it and tell you that are definitely good, but be wary of everything else I just said. Yeah. And it's like, everybody probably missed this.
Yeah, and most of the comments,
yeah. There's the guy, he hates meditation.
Yeah.
Anyone who meditates, he doesn't like them.
For months after, because what I'll do is when I do a video like that, I'll search for comments over the course of 2 or 3 months and make sure that I'm responding to people. And almost everybody that had an issue with the video hadn't watched the last 20 minutes. Yeah. They had shut it off somewhere when I was, probably at the peak of bashing it, and they didn't watch the last little bit where it all cinches up. So you get them to go back and watch that, then they would be like, oh, okay, now I see what you're saying. I disagree with half of it, but yeah, now I see what you're saying. So there's Bryan.
Yeah, I saw him pop up.
Hey, aloha, guys.
How you doing?
What's up, man?
Hey,
That makes me jealous.
Yeah.
we just got through 4 weeks of rain now, so that's
Yeah.
why I particularly want to be outside and get some of the sunshine.
Good for you. You're the one living the dream.
Well, doing what I can. This off-grid life seems to be easiest in Hawaii.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
John was just saying that his dream is to garden with his girlfriend, and I'm like, then Bryan pops up, and I'm like, there's the bastard that's got it all.
Well, then let's get to it. I'm sorry I'm late. We had to go pick up a car in Hilo, or a rental that just came back, and so anyway, we're here. And so, like, in that same way, I can dovetail into the conversation that you give a lot of what's wrong with meditation. We can kind of do what's similar in terms of the government or various governmental systems or very parasitic systems, call it all out, and then there is this kind of cinching up at the end. But we don't want to throw out Western civilization. We don't want to throw out the commons. We don't want to throw out responsibility, the people's militia, defending oneself. Kind of reminds me about the book that kind of took off within some circles of, I think it's Rianne Eisler, The Chalice and the Blade. She just did this big, huge attack of how feminine, matriarchal societies were strong with the chalice and sharing of the abundance. But then these big, bad male blade and worshiping of death's societies come through and wipe them out. And I guess that resonated for a while when I was into the non-aggression principle and some of that. I mean, I just could appreciate the argument, but then I'm seeing from the sovereignty side is that you have what you can defend. So this idea of being really well prepared and having good defense. But I think the biggest cinch is what you just shared with me yesterday, Bill, this idea of, yeah, it's fine to identify who the enemy is, and certainly by the third act, we need to know who the enemy is, and it could be from Western civilization, it could be like the various elites that we've talked about around the world. It's not just one group, but they're certainly all working together parasitically. The idea, though, is that we still need all of that is putting power outside of ourselves, and yes, we do need to deal with those that are outside of ourselves. But that kind of the breakthrough, the shift of understanding, well, where do we take our power back? Where do we build better defenses? Where do we inform and share information with others that stops the ability to parasite? And I think the biggest one, obviously, is deflating operational, deflating the deceit, deflating the lies, the errors, omissions, bias, conflation, all that type of stuff. It just, when you knock it out and it's not possible to lie, cheat, deceive, steal, all that type of thing, we certainly get the power back on our side, right? And it seems kind of, to bring it back to the meditation, that's the center. When you can stay in the center of all the noise, from political identity to discourse to propaganda to engineered argument online to all of that, and to stay centered and to see it all and say, still, we're going to move forward with the truth, because truth empowers informed decision and true reciprocity. All these things get better and better and better. And therefore, a final point would be, we want to keep the sword, sheathed until we really want to fight with it. Like that was, I think you brought up meekness. The meek shall inherit the earth. That was something around, and I know it gets garbly with the religion, but it was somebody who was a powerful warrior but chooses to keep his sword at his side, and he has the power to kill, but chooses at that moment to not, but still is well armed if needed, right?
Yeah, having the power, but having the constraint. And I think the other thing that I've been looking at, because I've still only really touched on agency. Because when I'm looking at agency, I'm looking at the individual and how it develops. So I'm always try to go from the least complex domain and then build up from there. So you start off with the biology, then you look at the interpersonal, then the societal and stuff. And Kurt had some good points about, because he starts with agency on the social level. And I think his premise is that man in nature is man in society. So human agency is within a social frame. I'm only now just mulling over that last level of complexity, which is at the social level. And as far as I can see, where things have gone astray for Western civilization, it wasn't a change in political structures, wasn't religion. It was this bedrock on liberty and autonomy that had been preserved through folk rights and through local customs. So it was the social norm that preserved it. And then every now and then, the institutions, whether that was monarchy and feudalism or it was parliamentary monarchy and so on, every now and then they would have to readjust to accommodate these folk rights. And it wasn't really until about 100 years ago that we lost that. We lost the social norms that was preserving that initial strength of the West. And I think that was an intentional attack. Right, that comes out of the German philosophers. It comes out of the religious apologetics that we're trying to deal with secular sciences and so on. So the enemies. So how I'm seeing it now is that the enemies that we have were only possible because we failed in transferring those values to the next generation. Somewhere around my grandfather, we stopped passing those on. That allowed those enemies to rise. If the intergenerational transfer was preserved, they never would have taken a foothold. And then extrapolating from that, any leaders that we have end up being a reflection of the social norms and the social temperament. So really the engine that drives a society is the middle. It's the temperament and it's what we'll tolerate in the middle that allows certain leaders to rise. But at the same time, we'll never be without those leaders. If we don't have leaders in direction, somebody to coordinate, we do atomize and we don't progress. So on one hand, it's like there's a balance of us in the middle as a volitional force, and then we have our leaders that are sort of it's like command and executive. The elite is the command aspect, we're the ones that execute on it. At some point, we've collapsed the line at which what we should be taking responsibility for ourselves and what we allow them to take responsibility for. So we've outsourced our social norms onto academics, onto leaders, and then we have them tell us what the proper social signals are. I think that's what we have to repair. We have to take some of that responsibility back, the responsibility of leading ourselves back. And because we atomize, it needs to be at the smallest scale. So as far as I can tell, the smallest political unit would be the family. So that's that whole cycle back to where I go back to familial collective intelligence, and that it's the family and it's at ourselves, and anything else, politics, social changes, all of that stuff are effects, not causes. The cause is the breakdown in the social fabric. So.
Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. But like with how civilization passed down these norms, when I talk to like my grandfathers and my grandmothers, but the one is deceased now, they don't have any of these principles properly verbalized or understood. It was just the way it was, and it was just transferred through attitude, really. Yeah. So, and when you try to really question them about what were your virtues, your principles, all those stuff, it was just like I was talking a different language. It had never been discussed, and they didn't know.
Yeah, and I think that's where the operationalism comes in. Is that it was passed down intuitively. It's like you do it just because that's what we do, Like that's, quite often a parent says, you do it because I told you to, or that's just not how we behave in our family. But there was no solid explanation or understanding as to why. And that was my same issue that came up with Robert and Jan, is that whatever you guys are doing, it's great, it's fantastic. I have no issue with it. I still have no issue with it. But without being able to explain the how and the why, we're going to get into the same situation again. We have to have the intellectual behind it when we pass it down to our kids so that they can adapt as the situations adapt and still preserve it. So.
Yeah, I feel like that's the same thing that old Peterson was talking about in some of his stuff too, is that you do a lot of things and you don't necessarily have, or he's talking about child development, that, kids will establish rules for a game, but they can't explain to you at all why. They just know that that's what allowed the game to continue. So it's something that's inherent in us from the very beginning, is that we come with a whole bulk of whatever you want to call it, the psyche, the subconscious, a whole bulk of knowledge that turns into action that isn't conscious knowledge. So for us to draw it into consciousness is the tool that even if we just codify it and have it sitting somewhere and you're not always trying to teach and explain, because that doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to just let the person learn by watching, in rock and roll, it's this way.
Yeah.
You can't say, well, if someone's not technical, and I'm not the most technical guy, but if they're not, you don't try and jump them into, halfway into music theory all of a sudden. You just show them your hands, and it doesn't matter if they understand why they're doing it. Now at least they can play,
No,
but
and I agree.
Later, if they're curious or they want to know what you showed them, then you can say, hey, here's the book. See, now do you understand what I gave you? Here's what I gave you. Here's the details. Here's the definitions, or
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense, because if you don't have and this goes back to the old fraternities and apprenticeship programs, is if you don't have the experience with it, when you jump into the theory, you're not going to grasp it. If you have some experience behind it, then know what to do. When you're told why, then it's like, oh, okay, now that makes sense.
Yeah, I've been thinking, like with universities and schools, they get the kids when they're young and they start teaching a lot about why and how. And when you're just like going into university, you have never done anything of the stuff that you're being taught, like in sociology or, all of the mental sciences. So it basically works just as an indoctrination. And that's why they all get politicized in the current where they are supposed to go, because they don't have anything to process it or any live experience to measure it against.
Yeah, and if you set the framework first, as soon as they get any experience, the experience just affirms the frame. Where
exactly.
You have experience first, and then you now have something to test the frames against. This was one of the things with the Tibetan and the Taoist meditation, is they would never open up a concept to you until you come to it in meditation first. So there's almost no instruction at all. It's like, here's the technique, go do it. And then you would come in when certain events would happen, and they'd either tell you just go back, and then if you did hit on something, like it's a crack in my head or a flash of light, then they would get into the theory about it and then set you off on the next thing. And so you wouldn't get it. You might go 2 years without getting any instruction at all. You just had to practice and practice and practice, right?
Sounds like proper education to me.
Yeah. This might die. I think this has a 40-minute limit. So if that's the case, I'll just set up another meeting and I'll throw the link back on Facebook, and then we'll re-pick it up again.
Cool.
Sounds good. Okay. Do we have a hard stop, or are we shooting for like an hour and a half, or 2 40-minute blocks?
Well, you guys can go on as long as you'd like. I did promise my daughter a walk in the ravine that I need to fit in before dinner. So
sounds good.
I don't want to push that off. So
yeah, I also have stuff to do. So
yeah.
We got in a dinner appointment. I was telling Bryan yesterday that me and my girlfriend, she has a full-time job, and so do I. I'm not required to work full hours, so I don't. It's more like depending on how much we're in production, so however much work. But as a part-time job for friends of ours, they own a limo company, and we're all having like a big dinner get-together to meet the other drivers and stuff. But we're really just backup drivers, so it sounds like we've all got proactive, forward-looking days.
Yeah. Well, and like I was talking to Bryan about, is that I wanted to get something more solidified where we're interacting, and in Facebook it gets tough when we're all working. It's tough. So setting up something like this where, you know, it doesn't have to be any topic. It's just shoot the shit, come together, talk about whatever, and we can do it every week, once a week, whenever, you know. Doesn't have to be me, doesn't have to be Bryan or anybody else. It's just if you guys want to set it up, set it up. So we thought we would try to get together and talk. So, yeah.
I was just mentioning, let's see, do I have it on mute? Okay. I was just mentioning my neighbor, also named Bryan. He's my mechanic and good guy and just helped me out on the cars and all sorts of stuff. And I asked him, did he recall if his father was involved in the Elks or the Moose Lodge, or was his grandfather involved in it? And we had a similar experience where our grandparents did the moose, the elk, and he said that his grandfather probably did the Lions one.
Lions Club.
But yeah, but certainly our fathers didn't. So there's talking about this breakdown of social norms, and just this ease of connecting and you know, it wasn't just subsidized alcohol that they were doing, but
it helps.
Yeah, when you buy in bulk, right? And you have all your friends coming. So anyway, this is more than 2 years ago out here. There was a discussion of like, why don't we have any fraternity or sorority groups here in Hawaii to try to have people connect and make agreements together and try to establish some maybe clan bonds. You know, they were not necessarily kin, but maybe have some clan bonds. And so that was an idea that's already kind of percolated down here, and it hasn't got any traction yet. So now it's interesting to think of this networked around the world kind of node. And I do appreciate that we're talking about some very clarifying, stabilizing information, and certainly giving ourselves a good goal to effectuate more truth in our reality as best we can, and to utilize operational language to you know, Bill and I have been kicking around some of these ideas, but I think the affinity of sheepdog democracy is we do seek to protect the innocent. We seek to establish this ethos of every man a judge, every man a sheriff. And behind it all is this kind of fatherly wanting to protect and provide. And we know that the system is corrupt at the core, and it's showing tremendous signs of weakness, which if we don't do anything about it, could have the worst case scenario. And if we just give our best efforts, we have a chance at a best case transition, you know. And that's what I'm excited about, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, and I mean, and it doesn't have to be limited to anything. I mean, you guys are doing the Korean farming out there. I'm looking at Cracky method and aquaponics. There's so many different areas where you increase agency, right? Which is protect the resources that you need to maintain your family and everything else. Like the idea of the Elks Lodge or the Lions Club was very much like that. I mean, guys might go there for beers after work on a Thursday night or whatever. They would also go golfing and hunting together. And in that, you know, Bob's down on his luck and he needs some work. Can you throw some his way? And it's all about reinforcing and keeping everybody, you know, moving in a positive direction. Why can't we do that again?
We actually, me and my homeboy joined the Elks because, well, he wanted to, and his dad was an Elk, so he sponsored us. I quit drinking about 4 months ago of it. But I was drinking too much, but not to the point where it was, you know, it was making me a lazy ass. I wasn't getting as much done. And it was just a process of vision of, have a couple beers at lunch because the boss and he's the one we're lunch together. And then have a couple. Have I actually had 8 beers? Have I, you know? So I just laid it down.